As the United States focuses under the leadership of the Biden administration relentlessly on a conflict in Eastern Europe that is materially irrelevant to our interests, Latin America is falling apart, certainly from an American's perspective. Chile is now in rapid decline and anti-American. So that leaves Brazil as the only large economy in this hemisphere that remains pro-American. It's an enormous economy, ninth biggest in the world. Brazil has some of the deepest reserves of valuable natural resources on the planet. So if you care about the future of the United States, you ought to care deeply about the future of Brazil. And you should certainly be aware of China's strong and ongoing effort to turn Brazil into a Chinese colony. Now, the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, is, again, the only pro-American leader left in Latin America. And yet, for the first year and a half of his presidency, our president, Joe Biden, ignored his existence completely. And if anything, the State Department was hostile to the Bolsonaro administration. Recently, Biden did finally meet with Bolsonaro for the very first time at the Summit of the Americas. Felipe Martins is a senior aide to President Bolsonaro, and we're happy to be joined by him tonight. Mr. Martins, thanks so much for coming on. So your president finally met with the American president. Why do you think, considering that Brazil is the largest economy in Latin America, it took that long?
Yeah, so as you say, Brazil is a very large country, very large economy, one of the 10 largest economies in the world. It has been that for 30 years. And Brazil was always part of the game. But for 2 years, we had this difficulty connecting with Washington, mainly with the White House. There was, of course, some connections with state and other departments. But now the meeting went well. And I think the reason why it took so long was the position that President Bolsonaro took, that election matters was something to be solved by Americans. And he would not call the election just because CNN and other media TV channels called it. So he waited, and once it was over, he then recognized the victory. He congratulated Biden, but he took a while. He said, let Americans solve it, and then I'll jump in. He didn't want to interfere. He was just respecting American sovereignty.
The United States, by contrast, has a decades-long history of interfering in other countries' elections. It has tried to do it in Hungary. Of course, they rigged the election in Ukraine in 2014. The election coming up in this country has grave consequences for the United States. I mean, the other candidate is openly pro-China. China's America's greatest adversary. Is your administration receiving any kind of encouragement from the Biden administration?
So, as you say, since 2009, China has been gaining a position here in Brazil, and Lula da Silva is very open about his position, not only about supporting China and other superpowers into our region, but also about supporting terrorist groups, about supporting organized crime, about supporting dictatorships like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. And yes, I think this meeting that we finally had, we were able to advance a little bit. As you say, it was a long time coming. It took a while, but finally, when the President Bolsonaro was able to sit with President Biden, he was able to remember who Lula da Silva is, the amount of corruption, the amount of scandals that we had here in Brazil. Those guys were responsible for more than 8 trillion reais of corruption scandals. That's something like $2 trillion in corruption only during his government. So the president told that to President Biden. He told something about the connections, and I think President Biden understood that it's better for the U.S., it's best for the U.S., for President Bolsonaro and a pro-democracy government to stay in power here in Brazil.
Interesting. And Lula, who's running again, went to prison for that.
He went to prison, yes.
Corruption. Right.
Yes.
Mr. Martins, I appreciate your talking to us. We'll be seeing you again soon in Brasilia.
Really appreciate it.